Just throwing that little dig in while we're doing the countdown timer.
Yeah, just throw it in there. Still
So
going to be better than Alex Iwobi.
We're back and the boys are fighting already. I took the
Yes,
week
we
off
are.
because the two lads were fighting so much last week. I couldn't be here to mediate, and I'm very sorry to our listeners that you heard what could only be described as uncontrolled mayhem and violence.
We had a
as
lovely
the podcast
time.
went on. It was lovely. Yeah, it was lovely.
We had a lovely
But
time.
we're back.
We had great crack, actually.
Gary's best addiction, incoming players into the Premier League.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we have a couple of little sleepers in the pocket. So if you haven't actually listened to that episode, you can. Where?
StatrCast.com.
There we go. I'm not
Welcome back, Jimmy.
Or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Aye.
You can hear us everywhere. We're everywhere. Yes, as you can see, I'm not even in this dimension anymore. I'm now in the Statr dimension.
Anyway,
it's a small box. It's dark, and there's nothing in here but statistics and love.
You don't love. Anybody who plays fantasy football does not feel love. You feel hatred, bitterness, and an overriding sense of arrogance when you finally win. That's the whole point of fantasy football. Yep. But anyway, onto today's actual episode. We have I'm not even letting you get an edge in on that one. I'm sorry, just no. So yeah, the topic tonight. Over the last couple of weeks, we have talked about defenders, us versus the FPL. We have also looked at how our model is different. We've looked at midfielders who are actually forwards. You know, one of the biggest problems that we have in the other places where the likes of Salah is actually a midfielder, even though he's not. And today we're going to talk about the guys whose job it is to keep the ball out of the hole. The guys who play their own sport, they're a little bit different. They're the goalkeepers. And then over in the GVC this week, we're looking at Brentford and Sunderland, I believe.
Sunderland, yes.
Fantastic. But more on that later. Jimmy, talk to me. You've been running some numbers, crunching some data, attacking the setting.
And this week, it's about the large, scary men at the back of the pitch. It's the goalies. And I had put this off for so long because I first thought I was scared of the numbers and then realized I was just scared of the men themselves. No ambiguity. There's no goalie that's anything other than a goalie. There's midfielders and forwards confused, as you said at the top, but goalies are goalies. There's one good one per team, asterisk, sometimes not. We'll get there later. And I wanted to have a look at who the top 10s were next door and ourselves. And to be honest with you, they're remarkably similar. However, there is some really interesting stuff in here, right? I'm going to start at the very, very top. I don't know who's looked at the stats and who hasn't, right? I'm going to start at the very top. There was two at the top of the league last year with 1 point between them. No prizes for guessing who number one is. As you can see from my name there, it's Jordan Pickford at Everton, who scored a single point more than Matt Sells over 38 games each last year. Both of them played every minute of Premier League football last year, and they're 1 and 2. And I came at it with my usual approach of going, right, well, what are the stats? What is it that sets Jordan Pickford apart?
He's busy.
And I had a look. He's busy, and busy is good. But more than that, he's a fucking maniac. He's running out making tackles. He's making clearances. He would have been miles ahead of Sells if he didn't also pick up yellow cards for half of these tackles. He's everywhere. Huge amount of saves, huge amounts of clearances, aerials, penalties saved. One of only 3 goalies. 3 of them saved 2 penalties last year, and he's one of them.
Can we guess that?
I don't know. Can you?
3 penalty saves last season. So we're going
to say Jose Sa was the other one.
Correct. And the other will not be in the Premier League next year.
I was about to say, was it Aaron Ramsdale?
Limpy Ramsdale. Yep. Yeah.
He will be in the Premier League next year.
Yeah, I think it was 9 goalkeepers that saved penalties last year, if I remember right.
Yeah, there's a good glut of them, but Pickford just insanely sweeper keeper, aggressive tank bulldog attacker his way to the top of the charts this year. Very few surprises as you go down. Sells obviously was solid, propelled largely by more clean sheets than anybody else. And then there's Flecken, who made more saves than anyone else. He will be missed. I believe he's off to Germany this season, isn't he?
He is.
So long, farewell. And more on that later. And next up, it's Raya Henderson. Robert Sanchez, who by all accounts was heavily criticised for his performance most of the season, strikes me as a fella who, like Onana, has a few very visible howlers, but spends the rest of the season being really solid. Nick Pope, and here I'm going to wave the flag saying FPL do better. Nick Pope is not in the top 10 over in FPL, even though their game is points over the whole year. In ours, he's 7th, even though he missed 12 weeks. His per game is outstanding. He has no competition at Newcastle. There's no real issue at the back there. He is always one to watch. He's a firm favourite around here. The safest pair of hands you'll ever find.
To be fair, I definitely had the strongest goalkeeper unit last year. I had Alisson
and Nick Pope.
Alisson and Pope, and I drafted both of them.
Both top 10. Both top 10. Well done. Both top 10, with the other two being a man whose future is unknown and a man whose future is doomed. The unknown is Emi Martinez at 9th for us overall. But I got to come back to this little bunch, because at 8th, it's Kepa, who's gone back to Chelsea.
No, he
probably won't play.
No.
It's talking about Arsenal, I think, isn't it?
He's transferred. He's going to Arsenal, 5 million deal.
Yeah.
Interesting. That makes a lot more sense career-wise, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. It's stupid. He's 30, and after having a really, really strong season, he's basically assigned the rest of his career to being a number 2 goalkeeper. So he's going up to Arsenal to sit on the bench behind David Raya, play a couple of cup games, and hopefully at the end of the season lift one of them, and he can say, "Look, I was part of it."
Do you think he'll stay? Do you think he'll sit behind Raya? Because Raya falls into that Sanchez and Onana piece where he has got a few howlers inside.
Raya's Raya's one of the best keepers in the league. He's going to be the Spanish price. Kepa's not better than him. That's just fact. He should have gone to a team like a Wolves, a Bournemouth. Like, stayed where he was at Bournemouth, it suited. He was having a lovely time doing his job. And now he's going to go be a second choice. I think it's stupid. I think it's a terrible career move for him. He should have stayed down on the beach and played football.
But we're not playing football. We're playing fantasy football. So while Raya is a better goalkeeper, that's not a statistical fact. Statistically, Kepa's better per game. But surely I would think being the second choice at Arsenal is better than being the second choice at Chelsea.
Would he have been second choice at Chelsea with Sanchez?
The thing is, at Chelsea, right, they're going to go buy a goalkeeper this summer. Emi Martinez is either going to be at Chelsea, United, or Atletico next year. I'm probably leaning towards United at the moment, or Atleti. But for him to go to Atleti, it means Oblak has to move on from there, and that's a big money deal, and I don't think a lot of teams have the money to do that. City would have if Ederson was going to Saudi, but the thing with goalkeepers is it's a fucking merry-go-round. You need basically the first domino to move for all of the other dominoes to move, if you get me. So it would have been Oblak to City to replace Ederson going to Saudi, which then would have freed up the spot there, because you can only have 3 goalkeepers anyway. So you're basically relying on what happens to Martinez to figure out what happens next.
Martinez is a big question mark for me, but what's really, really interesting in the numbers is that from Kepa down to Onana, and that's 5 goalers, Kepa, Martinez, Alisson, Leno, and Onana, all of them are under 230 and over 227 for the season. So what I'm getting at here is, in terms of drafting strategy, yes, there is a top tier of goalie, but how drafting goalies works isn't like how anything else works, because I can pick a forward and someone might go, "Ooh, I'll have a mid, ooh, I'll have a defender." No. When the button is pressed, when the big yellow button is pressed and somebody picks a goalie, everybody scrambles for the top 10 or 11.
Yep.
That's a good-ish strategy. The best time for the goalie run is when you decide to start it. Be the person that starts your goalie run, because I think Pickford is probably one of those must-have drafts if you can. The reality, though, is that almost nobody, except John, in a display of brilliance last year, nobody's going to have 2 of the obvious top tier goalies most seasons. So I had a look. I took a little stained rain jacket out of Gary's book, and tonight I'm going to bring you a must pick and a wild card. Ooh, because there is a man, an Irish man, who goes to waste and stands in place at Anfield when he can. You know his name, but you can't spell it because you're not Irish. It's Cuivín Kelleher. He's gone to Brentford, right? I was going to sing it like in Citizen Kane, but I wouldn't. He's gone to Brentford. There is absolutely no competition for that spot. He racked in 8.5 points per game last year. If you're not paying attention, he's not likely to be drafted first round, because few enough leagues in Ireland will have a Brentford fan. So he is absolutely one to grab early for your starting goalie. But don't
Yeah.
forget the bench. If you're playing Draft Classic, you want those extra points every week. You have to have 2 goalies. You have to have a sub goalie. You need to catch someone that nobody else is paying attention. And I am telling you now, gentlemen, his name is Neto. 10.5 points in the games he played last year, because they were very, very few, because he was Arsenal's backup man. But he's gone to Bournemouth.
He's gone back to Bournemouth, yeah.
And Kepa's left.
Yes.
And he is of a high enough caliber that he will play. The reason it's a question mark and not a must-have is because Bournemouth, as we have discussed, are probably facing a poor defensive season, if nothing else. They've been basically filleted at the back. But I think Neto is the one to grab for your second goalie. Remember, if your second goalie is scoring 8 per week, you are guaranteed a 4-point advantage off the bench over everyone you play.
I have everybody's keepers for last season up here. So I'm just going to run through the different keeper departments to give you an idea of how the goalkeeper rush fucking looks. So we would have had Jack. Jack would have had, with his team split on that wing, it would have been Henderson and Onana were his 2.
It's all right.
It's all
Two
right.
top tens.
Joey, on paper, had 2 stacked keepers. He had, with the My Prostitutes, he had Ederson and Raya.
We need to talk about Ederson, but go on.
Yeah. Dermot, with the Jolly Rogers, had Kepa and Statr, the Leicester goalkeeper who replaced Hermansen. I had Allison and Pope. Kim, with Killing Me Softly, had Hermansen and Areola. Dean, with the Old Republic, had Pickford, and Palmer, the other Ipswich goalkeeper that took over from Hermansen. Or, sorry, the actual, from Murich, not Hermansen.
Yeah.
Jimi, with the Aristocrats, had Sa and Leno. Actually, quite a fucking reasonable keeper department. Dave had Flecken and Martinez. Damien had Verbruggen and Sells. And Gary, with the Craigie Nagans, had Sanchez and Fabianski. All very good.
So, Ederson, right? Let's just clarify this again for the noobs, okay? Ederson doesn't do a whole pile because he's got a world-class defense in front of him. The perfect contrast in what you're looking for in a goalie and what you want to avoid, right? What you're looking for is a Jordan Pickford, who is a strong, active goalie in front of a gash defense, who's experienced, has been in the Premier League for a while. None of this blow-in stuff. Don't even talk to me about your Georgian Gary. Don't even say his name, whatever it's Billy. Okay, forget about it, right? Someone who knows his way around the Premier League and someone who is the last and first line of defense in a terrible team. That's Jordan Pickford. For that reason, I would be a little curious about James Trafford. What you do not want is an Ederson who might get the odd clean sheet, but frankly spends most of the game watching the game happen way up in front of him because City are miles up. Alisson suffers the same problem, lads. Alisson's 8.2 a week. It's not a bad score. It's a top 10 score in weekly, but it's not. It's likely that with the way Liverpool are spending at the moment at the back, that he's going to have even less to do this year. They're looking like they're going to go from strength to strength. Never quote me. But you don't want a guy who's going to be on a good team. There's the old trick in FPL was pick all of your defenders and goalies based on the team, based on who they're playing against. So if I want 3 Chelsea backs because they're at home to Southampton this week, yay, go me. I know nothing. All the players are the same. Look at the little jerseys. Fuck that. Does not work in draft. Does not work in our game. Nor should it. We reward players, not squad. So you want yourself a Pickford. You want yourself a Henderson if they do that again. You want yourself a Leno if he can pick his pace up, although his points per game were shocking this year, but
I think
the
that's
lowest
where
down to 38 games.
That's where Ramsdale, to be honest, ends up. That's
Fulham.
Yeah, so what you're going to have here is the financial calendar actually expires today, so teams will essentially start spending tomorrow properly. So this is why a few of the deals that are in the pipeline haven't been announced yet. So like Arsenal have 2 or 3 in the tank, including Christian Ødegaard, who we'll talk about later, but they're not announcing these deals till during this week for the new financial calendar. It's why Ramsdale hasn't gone yet. He's available for 15 million. Like, Leno is at that age now, and I think that's where they're going to go.
He's slowing down.
They've been touting him a few times over the summer so far.
As a talisman, Fulham are about to buy the most relegated player in Premier League history. I'm all for this. I look forward.
He's not the most relegated player in Premier League history. That would be Ben Foster.
Fair enough. Maybe you should buy him as well. I would love to see Fulham.
He's
go
also
down.
the keeper with
it
the
would
most.
warm
Ben
my back
Foster's,
heart.
hold on a second. Put some respect on Ben Foster's name. He was also the keeper with the most saves in the Premier League. There's only one active keeper who can potentially beat him, and he won't because he doesn't play anymore, and it's Fabianski.
Yeah, Fabianski got released, didn't he? He's done.
I think so. Yeah, West Ham.
Yeah, he got released from West Ham, didn't he?
They've done really 5, including cat kicking Zuma. So
So
whatever.
with what we've said in mind about siege men, and I know we've talked about this a lot, and the guys who are busy, I have to say, if you're going to take a wild punt this year, it's James Trafford. I think Burnley are going to do really badly, but in the past they've done really badly and it's worked really, really well. Even Tarkowski was picking up points at Burnley. The defense is going to be busy.
See, the thing is, James Trafford doesn't look like he's going to be playing at Burnley next year. And this is the major problem with looking at goalkeepers at this point in time in the season.
Nightmare.
Until 2 weeks before the season, goalkeepers are a fucking disaster to figure out, because what is looking like it's happening there is Newcastle have actually gone in for James Trafford, which means Nick Pope is on his way out if that happens. But for Newcastle to confirm Trafford, Pope needs to confirm his potential deal to Leeds. And again, we have to wait now till the new financial calendar opens up. So Nick Pope is probably 70% likely to be playing for Leeds next year. James Trafford is as likely to be playing for Newcastle next year. And this is the whole domino effect of goalkeepers. I think there's going to be a case in point where we look at this like a week out from the season, like drafting week, and going, right, who's landed where, and making decisions based on that.
Yeah, you don't look.
I get the too soon to call thing. I'm only going on. You see, this time doesn't exist for me. For me, there is nothing. It's why I'm in this weird dimension. I'm actually in a void until the statistics start back up again and the machine starts spitting them out again. I'm just kind of floating in space. But call it, boys. Give me who's your dream first pick? If you were 3 beers and 5 rounds in and it hasn't happened yet,
I know where Gary's going. We know where Gary's going.
I've already said it. I've already said as soon as he made the move to Brentford that it's Kelleher every day of the week. And you back this up as well. He'll play. It'll be in a bad defensive system. Keith Andrews taking over there at Brentford. I think traditionally
we're going to get to this.
We'll get to that.
We're going to have you're going to go. We're going to have a fucking argument again today. So
we are. But Kelleher's my number one pick, and probably if he's gone, then it's Nick Pope if he makes the move to Leeds.
Yeah, I would have said Pope in either scenario. But I just
it just depends on that piece around Trafford. If Trafford makes the move to Newcastle, and Pope stays there, then Pope comes off your draft board.
Completely off the draft board.
Yeah,
but if he moves to a Leeds, who again are going to be busy at the back, and Dermot will cover this when he comes back.
I'm not even going to lie. Pope to Leeds is enough to keep them up.
Oh, he's an exceptional shot stopper.
He's enough to keep them up.
He absolutely is.
He's extremely
which is why he'd be
underrated
on my draft board.
As many clearances as Pickford and Sells, despite only playing 28 games.
He's criminally underrated. I've been saying it for about 2 years. When he went to Newcastle, do you know what it is? He's not a fanciful guy. He's not the type of, like, when Onana came into the Premier League, it was this whole fucking circus of, he's going to revolutionize how goalkeepers play, because in Italy, he played on the halfway line like a psychopath. He was very entertaining to watch. His range of passing was phenomenal, but you can't do that in England. The game moves too fast. The game moves too fast.
Who the fuck
the game
wants a
doesn't.
Goalkeeper?
No, because it makes sense with the way they play and stuff like that. But you can't do that in the Premier League. The game moves too fast. So Nick Pope, being literally the bones of 7 foot tall, very agile, like, he saves. Like, that's the thing. It's just like he doesn't have sexy footwork, but as an actual goalkeeper, he's probably one of 4 keepers in the Premier League who I would put my house on in a big game and go, do you know what? I rely on you. 4 keepers in the Premier League. He's one of 4. The others would be Alisson, would be Ederson, and Martinez.
We'll never know about Ederson because he's too bloody insulated. That's the problem. He's kept away from the game, which is good for City. But he's not the kind of asset you want in this game.
He is, to be fair. He's very, very good at keeping the ball out. But the reason he's at City is his distribution is just I mean, he would probably do well in a championship midfield. He's that good on the ball. Do you know, like what's he got 7 or 8 assists in his Premier League career, something like that.
Yeah, if I'm going into a final tomorrow, those are the 4 currently in the league.
Yeah.
I
to be fair,
make a fuck up on the big stage.
To be fair, he's 4 assists last season, so that's probably more than several midfielders we could name. But that's it really from the goalies. It's the usual suspects because they tend to age quite well.
They do.
With Kelleher and Neto being the 2 I would keep a very close eye on if you're drafting. But yeah, it's Pope really all day long. But yeah, Sinead from the goalies. Next week I'll be looking at referees and linesmen. No, I don't do that. No. Okay, never mind.
Will we start that conversation about he who shall not be named in the referee? No, we won't.
We won't.
No, we won't.
Liverpool and their PGMOL league title. Anyway,
I am turning up to one of these podcasts with some facts and figures around fucking VAR and all this kind of stuff. I'm going to do it. I'm going to turn up some.
It's always.
Is nobody out to get us? We're league champions.
Everyone's out to get you now.
So everyone's out to get us.
Anyway.
It
is time to turn off the lights, pick up the tie, and lock yourself in the closet because it's the GVC.
Lock yourself in the closet. John, no, you've let yourself down there this week.
Asphyxiation shit. Like, what are you going to do?
No, you've let yourself down this week. I expected more from you. I'm not annoyed. I'm just disappointed.
And yeah, there wasn't
disappointed.
So for anyone that doesn't know what GVC stands for, it's Gary's Voyeur Corner, in which Gary Cronin watches a whole load of young men that aren't watching him.
Yeah, and then I look at fantasy football.
Jesus Christ. Anyway,
yeah. So every week, what do we do? We look at 2 teams in the Premier League next year. We look at some of the players who you want to draft, some of the players you want to avoid, and those wildcard picks that you want to look at. Who, if you get them right, they will win you your league. And this week we're looking at Sunderland and Brentford. And we'll get on to Brentford in a minute because there's probably a little bit to unpack there.
There's a lot to unpack.
There's a lot to unpack with Brentford.
So do we just move on Sunderland quickly? Don't pick any other players who are getting relegated. Let's move on.
No, that's a mistake. This is the team, right? So Sunderland are getting relegated. There's no 2 ways about that. We know that. They are probably one of the teams that might even do worse than... Who was it that finished last year? Wasn't Ipswich? Who was it? Southampton, was it?
Southampton?
Yeah. Sorry. My head, bit of a brain fart there. They are probably one of the teams who could actually potentially do worse. They scraped into the Premier League this year. They were super, super close in the semi-finals. I think it was a last-minute winner. In the championship final as well, something similar. Should have lost that game. They finished 7th. I think they finished 7th in the championship last year. So
yeah, something like that.
It was the last. It was or 6. They scraped into the playoff spot. They scraped through their semi-final and they scraped into the final. They've lost. They're probably their most influential player over the summer in Bellingham, going over to Germany. And fair play to him. He's earned that move. That's great. So normally you would run a mile from Sunderland, but there are 2 players who might be worth a look. And look, let's keep this in context. This is round 12, round 13 stuff to fill out your squad. These lads are not players that you're going to start in your 11 unless they're actually doing something quite well. And then you might consider bringing them in.
Do you know what they'd be? They like last year when you looked at Ipswich and you went, Zalap Davis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes teams coming up will have a gem player that you kind of look at and go, ooh, I'll have him.
Yeah.
Sunderland, I don't think are that team. I think Leeds are that team this year.
Yes.
But there's 2 players to consider. The first one is Wilson Isidore, who joined from the Russian Premier League. He joined from Zenit St. Petersburg. Played 46 games last. Now, these stats are obviously championship stats, so they don't necessarily translate to Premier League. But 46 games, 13 goals. That's a reasonable return in the Championship for a team who basically finished mid-table. But his shots on target and his successful passes are relatively okay for last season. 42 shots on target, so that's a goal return of what, about 23-24%, if my maths are right, and 236 successful passes. There's points to be made there. So if you were to pick him up and he sits on your bench, he's going to start every game. He could be picking up some points for you on a weekly basis. So that's someone to look at. The other one is Troy Hume, the Northern Ireland fullback.
I have 2 or 3 different players on my list, but go on.
Yeah. So you look at Hume again. We actually looked at fullbacks last week because we were comparing Kirkes with a couple of the new lads who were coming in from the continent to Bournemouth. But his numbers in the Championship stack up. He's made 122 tackles last year, 53 interceptions. He's won 172 aerial duels, and we know that they count for points in the Statr system. But he also had 3 goals and 6 assists. So at a Championship level, he looks like he is as good going forward as he is doing the dirty stuff in the back. The big thing with him is he's fond of a card. We did get 12 yellow cards last year, and if you're moving from Championship to Premier League, where there's a big step up in class, he might be found out. But again, is that somebody you take a punt on in round 14 and leave sitting on your bench? Possibly. They're the two I'd be looking at out of anyone else from Sunderland. But John, you say you've got somebody else.
I've got 2 others on my list. It was Enzo Lefebvre being one of them.
Mm.
So they would have taken him. They loaned him last year from Roma, but then they purchased him this summer officially for 20-odd million. Central midfielder, will play. He's quite decent. And the other one is, do you know what? This is probably head over fucking, what is it, heart over head? Patrick Roberts, I like him. He's Fulham Academy, went up to Celtic, was very good up there, went to City, or did he go City, then Celtic? Anyway, ruined his career at City. He's playing there now. He's a good player. I like him. Very able player. I would have liked to see him go back to Fulham a couple of years ago when he was rotting on City's bench, unfortunately. So I don't know if he's going to be the guy, but I'd like to see him kick on and be the player that everybody saw him be at Celtic. And in the reason why City bought him is because he was a fucking capable footballer. Like, City don't buy players who are muck, and they kept him around for a couple of years, not getting any minutes, but he was there.
Roberts is mine as well. Yeah. And I'm going to put the cold eye on it here. I didn't know he was Fulham Academy. I didn't know anything about the guy. I just had a quick look at Sunderland in terms of numbers. And what struck me about them is, yes, your boy at centre forward was banging him in last year, Gary. But the thing is, I think forwards do the worst transitioning to the Premier League, whereas there isn't much by way of squad depth out in the right wing. So I think Roberts is going to be, unless they go shopping, which I'm not holding my breath for, I think Roberts is probably pretty nailed on, whereas a Championship striker may find himself getting a taste of the bench after 7 weeks if nothing's happening, just by necessity, because Sunderland, I think, will get very desperate very quickly. I think Roberts is probably the one to keep an eye on. Despite being in the Championship, he's in single figures for cards. There's 8 assists there. There's a couple of goals. There's 48 fucking appearances. So they're clearly used to relying on him, but he's only 28. We're not talking about a 31, 32-year-old with chocolate chip biscuits for legs. I think in a just a very... What you're looking for with Sunderland players is, at least I'll get 4 points off the bench. You get that with the guy who's nailed on. You know what I mean? Nailed on it, he is worth more than anything.
Yeah, Patrick Roberts is my guy. Patrick Roberts is my guy. Like, he plays. Yeah, he's an attacking output type player. He scored the goal in the semi-final against Sheffield Wednesday in the playoffs. Like, he was class at Celtic. I was very that Fulham, the players that left that Fulham Academy over that 2-year period that went on, it really upset me, because you had Patrick Roberts who left, you had Harvey Elliott who left, you had Jermaine Ousmane Dembele who left, and that was in the space of 18 months.
I know Sunderland are awful, but you're going to have to let Fulham go just for 5 minutes, or else I'm going to come on in a Brighton jersey. I feel bad for Sunderland, because I think this is the only season we're going to be talking about them in the Premier League. They squeaked their way into competition by the skin of everybody's teeth, and they're going straight back down. I'd love to be wrong. I love an underdog, but this underdog has no legs. So can we get on to a good team? What do you got, Gary?
Yeah, let's talk about Brentford. So Brentford are a little bit of an enigma for me when I was looking through
It's a nice way to put it as well.
Do you know what it is? I was looking at their squad and I was kind of saying to myself, geez, there's 5 or 6 players there that you would look at and go, I'll have a bit of that. And then there's 5 or 6 or 7 players, or pretty much everybody else, where you kind of go, I'm not touching them. There's very few players in the middle ground for me. And this is what we'll get into. We'll get into this in a minute. You know, your top pick is obvious. You can probably guess who it is.
Johan Wissa?
No.
Shada?
No.
Nathan Collins. Jesus, what am I saying? Nathan Collins.
It's Nathan Collins every day of the week. Like, we've spoken about him on here. He's a beast at the back. He wins everything he needs to win. He may not be at Brentford, but for now he is. So that's who you look at. It's as simple as that. The player you probably look to avoid is Lewis Potter. You know, he played, but Christ, you know, his numbers were pretty poor, I have to say. For a team that did so, look, for a team that had 2 of the best strikers last season, in Mbeumo and Wissa. And the reason they're not on my list here is because they're obvious choices. So that, you know, that's the reason I don't have them here. But his shots on target, he had 14 shots on target, and Mbeumo with 41, Wissa at 43. Norgard, Arsenal's new shiny centre midfielder, had more shots on target as a defensive midfielder than Lewis Potter had as an attacking midfielder.
That's a great signing by Arsenal, by the way.
You know,
that's very clever. It's a very. Do you know what it is? It's an astute.
It's a squad. It is. It's a squad rotation signing because he's coming in to replace Jorginho, but it's a
no Thomas Partey.
No, Zubimendi is coming in to replace Partey.
Either way, Zubimendi, Jorginho are out, and Norgard and Zubimendi.
John, don't make me put you in the corner. We're talking about Brentford, not Arsenal. Don't make me put you in the corner.
Now, can you do it looking directly at me?
You can't look directly at someone during the GVC. It throws them off. Ruins their performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, my laptop.
Yeah, that was a very dramatic light off to just turn off the light in the corner in that exact moment.
Yeah.
Can I throw a sleeper at you, lads? Can I throw a man who I've been a big fan of for a long time? Because Mbeumo could be leaving, and Collins could be leaving, and Wissa could be leaving, and Norgard is leaving, and Flecken is gone. And in their top tier, because it's so, like, them and Damsgaard, and after that, it's all shit, numerically speaking. We're forgetting Ethan Pinnock, who is back from injury, has been an absolute diamond for fantasy for the last 5 years now. He had 9.1 per game last season. Now, I know, obviously, he would have been very used to playing under the last manager and all of the rest of it. That's 9.1 over 22 games. If he repeats that for 30 games this year, 31 games this year, we're talking about a 250, 260 point player. It would be criminal not to see him drafted.
Yep.
So
he's not an early pick.
We have a bigger problem, though.
What's that?
A bigger problem with Brentford. They are probably the biggest unknown quantity in the league right now. So obviously Thomas Frank has gone to Spurs, taken half of the staff with him. Ireland's Keith Andrews has taken the job. He was their set piece coach last year. Now, granted, I do have an article about this up on StatrCast.com where I look at who could be the winners, losers, and kind of players to watch out for in terms of Keith Andrew being the manager there. So do you remember that when Brentford scored 4 goals in the first 15, 20 seconds of the game? That was his design. Essentially,
he used the kickoff as a set piece, wasn't it?
Yes. Yep. That was one of his designs, and I get into the detail of all this kind of stuff in the article. It's actually a very cool piece because Brentford's model, they're owned by a guy who basically has made his fortune through the gambling markets and the sports betting books and stuff like this. So he's a very analytical. Himself and the guy that own Brighton are essentially, they know each other going back years because they basically made their fortunes in the same circles. So what you're dealing with there is a club that runs purely off a data model. So the idea of Keith Andrews coming in is that he's supposed to essentially be a continuation of the Brentford way. So Thomas Frank was hired internally. The manager before that was also hired internally. So he's going to basically be the third in a row of how Brentford do it. The only difference is this time in the Prem, they've also selling Norgard. They're also selling Mbeumo. They've already sold their goalkeeper. Stephen Kelleher should be good, but there's a big difference between being a second choice keeper and knowing you have to 5 to 10 games versus being expected to do it for 38 to 50 games. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of unknown quantity here, and like you could see some players, like more players could leave here, like Vissa could leave. You could have Nathan Collins who could be going if the rumors are true. Like, so you could
Who's he linked with, John?
He's linked with Spurs.
Really?
Yeah.
We
said
Liverpool, actually.
We said this about a month ago that and we actually got rinsed on TikTok for this. So you know what? I'm a little smug about this one because we literally said Thomas Frank is going to look at Nathan Collins. He would be an absolute rock at the back and a great replacement for Romero because he's also a captain. Remember, he's the captain of Ireland and he has worn the captain band at Brentford at times as well. Like he's a leader. Like it's a good signing. But if they lose 2 or 3 or more of these, Brentford, by all accounts, they build their planning into how they recruit. So you could actually be looking at fellas who were on the fringes last year. They buy new players to top up around the back, and these fellas then come to the forefront. So someone like a Kevin Shad, who was, we'll say, the third of the trio last year, he should, like, the whole Tony didn't replace him. They just went, we have this and Mbeumo, so we took the 2 of them in. Great.
Yeah.
They had that plan.
And Shad is actually my wildcard.
Yeah.
He is the player. He is absolutely the player you look at if you're considering some of those players who, as you say, John, didn't do the sexy stuff last year for Brentford, like Mbeumo and Vissa did.
Pinnock is my sleeper shout for next year. He's my wild card, is the one I said. I said the one to look for is Kevin Shad, and the one to look out for is Ethan Pinnock, because if Keith Andrews is going to be a set piece oriented, someone like himself or Ajer would be great options to be.
Yeah. And I think that's why I had Collins in there, because from the set piece side and the defending side. But Shade, he's not the sexiest of picks, but when you get into the numbers behind him, he ranked 12th overall last season on our system, which is ridiculous when you consider, Mbeumo was in that team as well. So there's another Brentford player who finished ahead of him, and he still managed to finish 12th. He had 11 goals.
3 players in our team of the year as well. Brentford had 3. Like, they were the sleeper team of last season. Like, if you looked at, we would have had Vissa and Mbeumo, Collins and Flecken.
Lads, can I be honest? Looking at the Brentford players altogether, yes, there's some amazing stuff in the top 7 or 8, but this screams squad depth problem to me, because in that 7 or 8, 4 or 5 are probably out the door, and below that, I mean, fucking Lewis Potter played 38 games last year. Lewis Potter played all 38 games and did nothing. Ben Mee, a firm favourite of old, got 7 fucking games, but the defenders all around him did get a whole pile better than him. I just don't see who fills these boots. If they find themselves without Mbeumo and Wissa,
they do, by all accounts, plan this, right? So you would have had, for example, Fabio Carvalho, who would have been bought a year ago, didn't play much this season, could end up getting more game time this year, because there is a gap, and he's been in the club a year to understand the system.
What about out front? I mean, I'm looking at Mbeumo, Wissa, and next forward down.
Carvalho would be a 10, so he would basically go behind Avisa.
Yeah, you'll probably find Carvalho and Shade will probably play further up the pitch. Shade played a little bit more back because traditionally at Damsgaard kind of playing as a nearly like a false 9 with Wissa and Mbeumo. Not so much on the wings, but nearly like traditional outside left and outside right. Yeah. If Mbeumo goes, Carvalho can fit in that space.
At the back,
if Vissa goes, then Shade's going to fill in on the other side.
Sepp Vandenberg would be the natural progression from Nathan Collins. This is what Brentford do. They're very similar to Brighton, just not to the same selling extent, because they don't have the same resources.
Sure,
at Brighton. They're
it's database Moneyball. I absolutely love this gig.
What's the latest? They buy like Brentford.
Has United put in a decent price yet?
That's going to be done this week. That's going to be done this week. They've basically come in a new offer. It'll be 65 and done.
It's probably wait until for the July 1st piece.
Yep,
that's probably what it is. Although the last I heard, there is a difference between valuation and offer submitted, but I'm sure
we're not talking.
He wants to go. I'm sure United will stump up the money because they know they have to fill out a spot there.
So the last
if I'm the Brentford coach and I've got that lump of money, there's no way I'm not buying a striker. There's no way.
See, this is not how Brentford work. It's the same way that Brighton do, the way that Brighton do. Like, over the last few years, so they would have had Ollie Watkins a few years ago, who was a winger, turned him into a striker. His replacement was Ivan Toney, who they bought from Peterborough, who became Ivan fucking Toney, and his replacement was already there in Mbeumo, who they bought for 4.3 million from some French team. If they get 60 million to 70 million for Mbeumo, they're not going dropping out 40, 50 million on a shiny new toy.
No?
That's not what they do. It's
Okay.
going to be someone that could play in fucking League One, Championship. It's going to be some fella that Keith Andrews met in a park in Cork on holiday. That's the Brentford way.
Somebody you've never even heard of.
That does sound very Brighton, to be fair.
They're very, very, very similar in their model. Very,
Yeah.
very, very similar. The only difference is Brentford had to obviously do the new stadium in the last few years. So they're probably a few years further behind in the Brighton model. And Brighton aren't that fucking team anymore, because I actually referenced this recently in an article. They've spent over the last 2 to 3 years, they've sold 50 million, or 2 years or something like this, sold 50 million and spent like 250 million or something like this. Last summer, I think it was where they flipped the script, because they bought players like Matt O'Reilly for 30 million. They bought the fees added up, basically.
Yeah.
Caicedo, McAllister.
They're
2 years ago.
Whatever it was, in the last like 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah,
okay.
They kind of flipped to a buying club than a selling club.
Yes.
And more on that next week, I believe. So let me ask the really awkward question.
Right, next week, actually, yeah.
Mbeumo, and how I love that man, even though we feel no love in fantasy football, he's obviously going to be a first half of the draft pick. But my question to you, gentlemen, is this. If he goes to United, how soon do you pick him?
Not before round 3?
Or
round 3 or 4.
A lot of that depends on what other business United do. But he could be a second round.
I think he becomes Bruno on the other side of the pitch.
No.
I think he scores like an absolute fucking maniac. I don't know why. I just see him at United as working. I see it.
I get what you're saying. I think it'll work, but I don't think you can pick him in a first round. You just can't.
Well, I got him in the 9th round last year.
Yeah, he's going to
that was
absolutely bumping up the rounds. Don't get me wrong about this.
I think he's around 4 for me this year. Jokes aside about like playing with the emotions of the United fans, I think he's around 4.
You see, the thing with Mbeumo last year was he was the number 1 player at Brentford. Is he going to be the number 1 player at United? Like, he's going to be there. He's not going to be. Fernandes is the number 1
strike force with the United.
Well, Bruno. No, even from a strike force perspective, there's question marks there. I mean, Cunha is coming in. So
and one other and United.
Yeah. So is he going to be the number 1? So
I think he's going to be United's best asset next year. I think he outscores Bruno again this year, but he does it in a United jersey. Genuinely.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to bet my first 2 rounds on it.
But that's exactly the thing. But if we're looking at this Brentford team now, Gary, so you're saying you're picking Collins, you're picking
Collins, you're avoiding Lewis Potter, and Shade is very, very close behind Collins as your top pick, to be fair. But I don't think many people would consider him because Bisa and Mbeumo did all the business of going forward last year. Shade kind of went under the radar, but given his numbers for last year, given that he will probably be over all of the set pieces for Brentford now, and with Keith Andrews becoming head coach, I think you have to consider him for a later round pick.
I'm going to throw in Pinnock as the wild card just because I think after 6 years under the same manager, with all the change there, it's questionable, but he is a player of extremely high quality, and he's always served me well. So
I'm going to go. I'm going to go do the emotional thing for my wildcard pick, and I'm going to pick another Fulham Academy player in Fabio Carvalho as my wildcard pick. They're everywhere.
I'll tell you what. If that comes off from rank 383, my hat is off to you, sir.
He was actually so close to being my avoid pick. I just don't think he has the ability at this level.
I love when John drafts.
You don't like him because of his time at Liverpool.
No, I love him for his time at Liverpool. He scored a great winner against Newcastle in one of the title run-ins. So I have nothing but love for Carvalho.
There's a reason why.
And I really, really wanted him to work out because I actually think he could have been, looking at him, he could have been class. But I just don't think he has. I just don't think he has the ability for it at this level. I think he's too light, and I don't think he has the heart for it. But I could be proved wrong, and I would love to be proved wrong.
The reason why Liverpool bottomed that year after the season he had is because he was the best player in the Championship in a year that Mitrovic scored 50 goals, and he was the ammunition for that.
Yeah,
he was the ammunition behind it. Oh, my favorite player of all time! Don't even get me started.
Alex Iwobi.
No, Alex Iwobi is my current. He's my current because Mitrovic is back in the league. But I've already said it now. United do not, and here's my hot take: United do not go and drop 80 million on Gyökeres. He will never live up to his price tag. He will be good for you, but he will not live up to his price tag. Go create the prick 11. Go sign Emi Martinez in goal. Put Bruno Fernandes in centre midfield. Put Cunha on the left wing, and put Mitrovic up front. And give me the bastard 11 that I have always dreamed of.
Wouldn't it be amazing if the turnaround this year was that they were tactically ahead of every other team because they went back to like break your legs approach, just nothing fancy, no long balls, no short balls, just brutalize the other team, but just play the Wimbledon way, complete and win the league by it.
That's what I want. I want big boy Mitro up front. Him and Martinez bookending a pitch, I just think would make for TV gold. With Bruno throwing strops in the middle of the pitch and Cunha just elbowing people. The only other person you need to add to that prick 11 is João Pedro, but he's off to go inside for Chelsea.
He's off to Chelsea.
Deal agreed.
Which means he won't be on my list for next week, because next week we are looking at Brighton, I believe.
We're looking at Brighton. Next week is Brighton and...
I don't know. I will have to look up. I'll have to look it up. Who comes before Sunderland and the...
I'll tell you now.
Depending on what way you did at Spurs, but we did talk about it, didn't we?
Yeah, so it's Forest. Is Forest?
Forest.
Ooh.
Forest and Brighton.
That'll be an interesting discussion. That'll be an interesting one. But yes, that is it for the GVC this week.
I like how you started even referring to it as that. It makes me happy.
I'm just leading into it
now. Everyone open the curtains and put your belts back on.
You're just going to leave him with the leaning into it comment. Okay. Okay.
But that's what she said. No.
Hey. Anyhow.
Brighton next week.
I
better get in training.
Jimmy, my favourite week is going to happen right before the season. You're going to have me and Dermot looking at Leeds and Fulham together.
I have the flu that week.
I
have a cold.
I think I might actually be away that week.
I don't think you need any of the rest of you there. Just leave me and Dermot and just scream at each other for the bones of an hour.
Yeah, just 45 minutes of the two of you screaming at each other how Fulham and Leeds are better than the other one.
Yeah, it's Fulham. It's Fulham.
Bottom half bullshit. What?
It's just John screaming at his camera saying Alex Iwobi over and over and over again.
Oh, are we gone back to the voyeur corner? God, John, look, John, we all love Alex Iwobi. We do. I love Alex Iwobi. I love him in Everton as well.
Him and Anthony Robinson have been class this season, and they're going to do it again next year.
Pronounce it properly. Anthony Robinson.
I just like that he goes by the name Jedi. Anywho.
And well earned.
Anywho, right. The final update, because I'm done with y'all for today. It's time for me to go and have my one-man nap. So, the article on Keith Andrews and him taking over at Brentford is obviously over on the site right now. You have articles on all of the team's first 5 fixtures. You have the full Premier League fixture list over there. Jimmy has been working on a lot of these articles around the midfielders, the defenders. So there's a shitload of content over there. Keep an eye on the socials. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of them. Statr Draft, find us there. We'll keep informed on how close we are to the game releasing. Basically, that's the general gist. I don't know. Jimmy, do you want to do it more of like pizzazz than me today?
Hello. I speak to you from a mysterious black cube full of pizzazz, statistics, and absolutely no love. It's been wonderful, gentlemen.
That's good night. Talk to you on the other side, boys.